Welcome to the Energy Talks podcast. I'm energy journalist Markham Hislop, and my guest today is Glenn Garry of the Victoria Electric Vehicle Association. And we're going to be talking about a February 13th letter to leaders of all the major political parties. That 20 plus association signed the letter, and it's got some great recommendations in it. I'm looking forward to having that chat. So, welcome to the interview, Glenn.
Thanks, Markham. Always good to be here.
And it's always good to have you. The electrification of transportation is taking off like a rocket globally. I think Canada is behind the curve at this point. Where are we at with electric vehicles in Canada?
Across the country, we're somewhere in the 18-19% of sales each year, which is pretty good. BC is probably pretty darn close to 25%, which is good because the BC government wanted us to be at 26% by 2026. So yeah, it's doing pretty well.
And I think Quebec is up to like 32%. Those are the two leading provinces for EV
Yeah,
adoption.
Quebec is higher, but they're also a much bigger province per se. So yeah, they're doing very well.
Okay, well, look, a very interesting set of recommendations, and you have, as you pointed out before we came on the air, many sub recommendations. So I'm going to ask you to give me your top three from your point of view, and then if there's any time left at the end of the interview, we'll get into one or two other ones. So, what's your number one recommendation?
Well, number one is supporting current initiatives. So that means turning around, keeping the light duty vehicle mandates on. This is more not for the consumer per se. This is for the business community. Business community runs on certainty. So, having targets that move up and down does no one any good. If you, as we used to say in the Navy, if you know where the wind's coming from, you can set your sails and still get to where you want to go. So yeah, maintain those sort of things. We'd like them to turn around and do something that's very simple for the government to do and very simple for dealers to manage. And that's waiving the GST on all new and used electric vehicles. Okay.
Okay. Well, and you mentioned mandates, and we should point out that what you mean is sales mandates.
Correct.
There's a federal sales mandate, and I think that some provinces have sales mandates as well, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. That's very interesting. The increase public education angle here is of interest to me because like you, I follow a number of EV groups on social media, and Facebook would be a big one. And one of the things that I find fascinating is the communication around new technologies that you see in these face groups that you used to find, farmers would gather at the local coffee shop and talk about their new combine or whatever it was. And the social media groups have kind of stepped in where, you see the newbies that come along and say, well, I'm thinking of buying this or that. And it's fascinating to me what the role that those groups are playing in the adoption of this new technology.
Yeah, because there's nothing better than someone who's actually living in that new technology to be able to demystify and reassure new people. And that is the major thing that the EV associations from Victoria to Newfoundland do. That's one of our main things is make it easier, de-risk for the average people, because when you talk to an EV association, you're not talking to a dealer, you're not talking to a company, you're talking to another Canadian who's living it. And that's a big thing. We'd love if the federal government, whoever that is, and as associations, we don't care who it is as long as the policies are good. They should turn around and enhance education programs, because there's an awful lot of misinformation out there, and it's well-funded misinformation. So it'd be great if we could have government step in and demystify and kind of take away some of the fear, uncertainty, and doubt FUD.
What is your second favorite recommendation?
Well, EV charging infrastructure. So right now in urban areas, EV charging infrastructure is going along pretty well. Across the country, 2/3 of Canadians live in a single family home, one where they would be able to take charge of their own charging for light duty vehicles, and they do, right? That's easy to do. Charging takes you 20 seconds, 10 to plug in, 10 to unplug, and carry on your way. You leave with a full tank every day. So yeah, that's the easy thing. Moving out though, the Trans Canada Highway, that needs to be electrified for medium and heavy duty trucks. Now, even though medium and heavy duty trucks are only 8 to 10% of the traffic on our roads, they contribute half of all the pollution and greenhouse gases that are emitted in transportation. So it's kind of a no-brainer to take them out. Every medium and heavy duty truck that goes electric is the equivalent of having 5 gas cars off the road, right? So it's a huge hit.
Right. Let's talk a little bit where that technology is, because I've done a number of interviews about that in the last little while. So
Mhm.
the medium duty trucks are pretty much market ready,
Yeah.
and they're beginning to diffuse into the marketplace. You see a lot of that in places like China, Europe, starting to see a little bit of it in the U.S. Haven't seen much of it in Canada yet, but I assume that we will, very near in the future. The heavy duty is we're still, I think, we're beginning to see it. Uh, but not yet, and at scale, and probably we're a couple of years away from having the battery capacity to do that. Would you agree?
Uh, yes and no. So if you go to medium duty regional, they're mainly doing out of base operations, so they return to the same place every day.
Mhm.
That's done. That's easy. When we talk about heavy duty, when you do you look at how many kilometers and how much tonnage happens. If you have a vehicle that can do 400 kilometers, you're going to carry about 82% of all the tonnage on the road. If you expand it out to 800 kilometers, you've got like 94% of all the tonnage on the road. That's a key metric. That means that you don't need to have a heavy duty truck that can go 2,000 kilometers at a go without stopping, because apparently there's a guy wearing a diaper behind the wheel. Yeah, you don't need, the problem isn't as big as people assume.
Oh, okay, fair enough. But regardless of what is potentially available, the fact is that heavy duty trucks are still in their infancy, and they're just now being evaluated, and we're seeing a little bit of adoption by carriers.
Yeah,
Unless
and
you're in place,
I'll give
but
a shout out. Yes.
hang on. Unless you're in places like China, where they have a deliberate policy of electrifying the transportation, and then they subsidize it to a greater degree than we're seeing in North America. So the question is, if it's theoretically possible and there are benefits to doing it, are the associations in favor of the government stepping in with greater subsidies and incentives and policy to speed up the adoption of electric heavy duty trucks?
Yes. And the way you do that is if you electrify the Trans Canada Highway and its major tributaries, you within 100 kilometers each side of that, you've got over 92% of Canadians living. So if you do that and you have medium and heavy duty charging infrastructure along those routes, then you can start at every 200 kilometers along those routes outside of the cities. You've now paved the highway to do that. And you'd pay for it the same way we paid for the Trans-Canada Highway. Federal government picked up part, provincial government picked up part, municipalities picked up part, right? And that's how you electrify the Trans-Canada Highway. The trucks themselves, it's a matter of scale. The more that are bought, the cheaper they get. The person who makes his own pencil will probably have to spend $5,000 or $6,000 to do so. However, if you make 10 million of them, they're 10 cents each. So, that's the whole scale thing.
Yes, understood. I mean, that's one of the reasons why China has been able to get their prices for their EVs down is they manufacture them at scale. And then, of course, we put 100% tariff on them. And speaking of, it's a good segue into another one of your recommendations is to begin to lower tariffs on imported EVs like from China.
Right. So the federal government of the day last year turned around and did what they thought was the smart, good ally thing and brought in 100% markup on Chinese EVs coming to Canada. Because they were a threat to the North American market. They didn't say that was a threat to the North American market because the North American market had been digging their heels in for 15 years and ignoring the future coming at them. And then they decided that, like the wagon train that goes into a circle to defend itself, it is no longer making progress. So that's essentially what they did. So this isn't the first time CAD has come across this. In the 80s, we turned around and saw new Japanese high-quality cars coming into the market, efficient high-quality cars coming into the market. And the market here saw that as a threat. So how did we address it? We turned around and said, if you want to sell your cars in this country, you will have to build factories. You will have to use local materials. You will have to employ Canadians. So we would like to see that the tariffs on Chinese EVs, are reduced to zero for those companies who make those commitments, not just make the commitment, but are actually doing it. So a bit comes off when you make the commitment, a bit comes off when you build the factory, more comes off as you invest into local materials and you start employing people and when you start producing your cars. You do all that, you're at zero. This will give time for for our legacy companies to get their act together. I hope they do.
Okay, I've got a question for you, and this comes out of the concern that was raised by the Americans, and I don't know whether it's a reasonable concern or they just, one of those things they justified their tariffs with. But they were talking about connected Chinese vehicles that could, say, collect video or photos and then send it back to China, and so that was a security risk. Um, what do you make of that?
Well, history has already shown that this can be beat. So when Tesla started selling in China, those same concerns came up by the Chinese Communist Party. We don't want you spying in our country with your cars. So what happened was all the data, any video data that is collected is maintained in the country that you're coming from. We set up the same rules, Yeah, that's not a showstopper. And it's kind of paranoid considering that every one of these things, right, that is passing out far more about your life than your car ever will.
Yeah, fair enough. I just
Yeah.
the Americans did advance that as an argument in favor of the tariffs, so I thought I'd ask the question.
Yeah, many
Um,
things are said in the States that are not based in reality,
Regardless of which party happens to be.
regardless.
So I've asked you about what your first and second recommendations would be, or your most favorite. What's the third?
Well, love to see. I know a number of governments, including the British Columbia government, have done all the research required for them to set regulations requiring sales targets for medium and heavy duty vehicles. So all that work has been done, and it has been stalled. I'm going to guess politically. Don't know, but I'm going to guess politically. I'd love to see whatever government forms after this next election. I would love to see them turn around and do the logical thing and start requiring that these vehicles come into the market. Right? That again, it turns around and it sets certainty for the makers. They know that if they make the vehicles, that there will be a market. The people who are already out there operating, they know that they're going to have other vehicles they can buy, and it'll do everything that's happened for light duty vehicles, which has been for policy successes in the whole sustainability, clean, climate-driven world, EVs have been a huge, huge win. Great policy win, and those sort of things need to be encouraged.
I would argue that in fact the driving force now is not climate and not clean. It's clean. It's clean energy technologies, and I mean China has shown the way because what they did is they promoted both the development of the supply side and the demand side at the same time. And it seems to me that any kind of EV strategy that we have, and we should, as you say, look beyond just light duty passenger cars and trucks, but to medium duty and vehicles that are suited for northern climates, for in forestry and mining, in oil and gas, that sort of thing. And that any kind of strategic approach has got to consider both the manufacturing locally, whether we invite existing companies in and to build factories, or we do it with domestic entrepreneurs, however you do it, but combine the supply and the demand side. Just simply focusing on the demand side is not to me the best strategy.
No, it is half the strategy, but it's the one that business wants to see first out the gate. They don't want to invest in something that's going to come along at the next, turn of a government and it goes away. That's bad for business. That's bad for people working in the industry. It's just bad.
Yeah, I get that, and that's been a criticism of things like home renovation for years. You get a 4-year program, the industry gears up, then you get a change of government, the industry gears down, and then they gear up again. It's far, far from ideal if you're trying to put in a policy framework that promotes change. So where does this leave us? I mean, have you had any response from the political parties to the letter?
Well, no, and we sent this out ahead of time, and not so much that the politicians would be looking at the time. This document was built for all the policy people in each party, who were building up the briefing books. Should they form government, that'll go to all the different cabinet members. They'll say, "Hey, here are the ideas that kind of make sense," and lean into whatever party it is, leans into our platform. We've encouraged, and we didn't get into it, but trying to do as much of the vehicle production here in Canada, and that goes all the way from mining sustainably to the car at the end of its life. The battery comes out, goes into stationary storage for another 2 decades, and then gets fully recycled. Right, all those things. It was meant for the policy people, and I'm trying to remember. You might know this. Was it Kim Campbell or someone else who said, "Policy is or during an election is no time to discuss policy." And
That's
we need
exactly
that.
what he said. It was Kim Campbell
Yeah,
in
yeah, yeah,
1994, I think.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's yeah. This is more for after the election. We know that all our elected representatives come with a lot of different skills and experience, but they don't necessarily have the skills and experience in this field. And probably somewhere in their area of 1.5 million Canadians who have experience with EVs in their lives. That's a bit of a resource to draw on, and that's what the EV associations and owners groups across country are here to offer.
One of the enlightening moments for me was talking to experts who are consulting with policymakers and the bureaucrats who support them, and learning that there is a dearth of expertise across a wide variety of energy technologies. It's not just electric vehicles. It has to do with, power grids and all sorts of things. And so the government over the years has learned to rely upon trade associations, companies in the industry, experts, other experts, maybe they're academics. So
Consultants,
consultants.
expensive consultants.
But my point here is that a letter like this, while it may not get a formal reply, can actually do a fair amount of good in that it informs the advisors and the bureaucrats, the civil servants who are working on these files, and it can influence the way they think. And so I commend you guys for putting this together because I think this is exactly the approach that's needed. Give them ideas, and some of them may turn out to be adopted into policy.
And they know its ideas that the citizenry, the citizen taxpayer, finds are useful, right? Here you've got a constituency that is behind this whole thing. And when we got, the 29 groups across the country together, we were emulating something we'd done for the last two BC elections, pushing out policy recommendations ahead of time. They've been useful, I think. Some parties have quoted them word for word. So I don't know. We found the BC government to date has been pretty open to good ideas, and I'm sure these ideas are just confirming what they already think. But again, it's good to hear the citizens supporting them.
Indeed.
I'll
Well,
take
thank
it.
you, Glenn.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for this. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Markham.